Ozzy never called me, and I get this call from him, and he's like, "Hey, Rob, hey, listen, let's go on the road, man. You know, I'm ready. Ozfest, we're playing, right? You know," and I'm like, "Yeah," because I hadn't heard from Metallica, so I was like excited. Yeah, I get to go back to work because he started doing Sabbath at the time. They reunited, and so everything was revolving around Sabbath.
Okay,
and literally like 2 days later, or the next day, I get a call from Lars saying, "Hey, we want you to come up here and we want to talk to you." So I'm like, okay, you know, they're not telling me I got the gig, but I'm like, thinking, I always think worst case scenario. So thinking they're the kind of guys that would call you, that would have you fly up there to tell you didn't get the gig.
Gotcha. Yeah.
You know, they're just kind of wired that way. Like, we just wanted to tell you in person because we respect you and you didn't get the gig, you know, something like that.
Sure.
So I'm like preparing for that.
That's Robert Trujillo. I'm Jamie Brisick. This is Soundings, brought to you by the Surfers Journal. The Journal is a member-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from FCS, Finisterre, Howler Brothers, Outerknown, Patagonia, Rainbow Sandals, Vans, and Yeti. More like a book than a magazine, the Journal delivers 136 pages of independent storytelling every 8 weeks, covering the people, culture, travel, and art of surfing. To learn more and to subscribe, please visit surfersjournal.com. This episode of Soundings is presented by Costa Sunglasses. If you're anything like me and you spend lots of time around the water, then you know just how important it is to have a good pair of shades. And since 1983, when a group of intrepid outdoorsmen set out to make sunglasses that could stand up to the harsh environments they regularly encountered, Costa remains the choice in eyewear among those committed to life on the water. So whether you're diving in, climbing a board, suiting up, sliding one, leaning back, or all the above, head to costadelmar.com to grab your pair and to see what's out there. Robert Trujillo first rose to prominence as the bassist for Suicidal Tendencies, which he played in from 1989 to 1995. He was a member of Ozzy Osbourne's band for a number of years starting in the late 90s. Since 2003, he's been the bassist for Metallica and was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame alongside the rest of the band in 2009. He played, and still plays, with the funk metal supergroup Infectious Grooves. In 2014, he produced a documentary about jazz bassist Jaco Pastorius. Robert grew up on the west side of Los Angeles, where he found music, skateboarding, and surfing at a young age. A goofyfoot, he gets in the water regularly, weaving wave riding into his heavy touring schedule. He's also a husband and a father. We spoke in my Malibu studio. Wind whipping, helicopters hovering, leaf blowers roaring, the modern-day LA malaise. So, Rob, welcome to the show.
All right, it's great to be here.
My first question would be, how did you find your way to music, and how did you find your way to the bass guitar?
It's a good question. So growing up, I was fortunate to have parents that were very young. I mean, my mom had me when she was 19, and my dad was 21. So I grew up with the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and then whatever was going on in the 60s. And then in the 70s, I was right in the thick of it with Motown, you know, James Brown, and then, of course, Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath. But there was also this connection that I had to funk rock music. So that would have been like the Ohio Players and Kool and the Gang and bands that were really bass driven. So now you take the sort of funky bass vibe of the 70s, and then my father was a hobby guitarist. He played flamenco guitar. And so from watching him and his finger technique and then listening to these funk-driven, these bass-driven funk bands, I realized that that was the instrument for me. It took a while. I wanted to be a drummer first and then a keyboardist, but the drums, we always lived in apartments and couldn't play drums in apartments. It's too loud. And then keyboards, I couldn't get a piano up into the house. It was also loud, so that was a problem. And my dad happened to have a friend who had a hollow body bass guitar. It didn't work through an amp, but I could hear it because it was a hollow body. So I just practiced on that for a year.
And was it so? I get the thing of like the other instruments are big or hard to move around, but did the bass start to kind of speak to you? Did you feel like this instant connection?
Yeah, I mean, I realized at a certain point. I remember watching, I think it was Cal Jam, and I saw a bass solo. I think it was a band called Rubicon, and Jack Blades, I believe it was, and he was playing a bass solo. And that was the first time I'd actually seen a bass solo, but that was also when I realized that that was the instrument that I had been drawn to because of sort of the rhythm section in a lot of those cool bands that I grew up listening to, and I was a huge fan of, you know, like a song like Jungle Boogie, you know, do 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 do, like that bass line is so memorable, and you know, it just kind of, for me, it spoke to me, and it had a place for me because it combined the melodic elements of a bass that I like and the power, but also the riff. You know, the riff is important because riffs are what you hear in everyone from Metallica to you know, to, I mean, Kool and the Gang or the Isley Brothers. You know, Deep Purple. You know, riffs combine the bass and the guitar. You know, they work together, but it's also what carries the song. A lot of the times it's the groove. It's also the groove. I mean, the groove is what I think is the most important ingredient to any song, for me at least. That's what gets the head bopping, gets you dancing. And, you know, I guess in thrash or heavy metal kind of gets the mosh pit going.
As it started to take off for you, was it, did it kind of like inhabit you? Were you always hearing riffs or something, you know, music in your head?
Yeah, I you know, I guess it's a blessing and a curse because sometimes that wakes me up at 3 a.m. and or prevents me from going to sleep at a decent hour. You know, I get these ideas. I've been on a roll lately. As I've gotten older, I've really, at least in the last couple of years, I've really gotten kind of on a creative, how do you say, like the creative juices have been flowing. They've been extra activated for some reason. I don't know if it was kind of all that weird downtime during the pandemic or what, but I've just been like kind of spewing out ideas and writing a lot. You know, I've been doing a lot of writing and a lot of recording, and it's great. You know, especially late into my career. You know, a lot of times musicians, when they get a little older, that kind of goes away. Yeah. But for me, it's kind of intensified again. I mean, it was really intense back in my early 20s, and then it kind of subsided for a while, but it's sort of kind of reinfected me again.
It's such a nice thing, though, when you have it kind of moving through you, right? I mean, it's...
Yeah, it's powerful.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of the things, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but my family, you know, my kids, my wife, we're really creative based. And up there where we live in Topanga, you know, we're able to sort of escape certain realities of urban living. And we have the ocean close by, and we can go hiking. But at the same time, we have a lot of instruments in the house, you know, and I went through a phase where I was playing a lot of piano. I was even getting into some Beethoven. You know, my son Ty, you listen to what's coming out of his room, and you're going to hear a lot of guitar, you know, a lot of riffs, but you're also going to hear a lot of bass, and then you're going to hear some synthesizer work. And you know, my daughter plays drums, so she's active on the kit. And down in my wife's art studio, she's singing a lot and also writing songs. Everybody's got their own little studio, you know. So there's a lot of that kind of energy in our household, and then of course artwork. There, you know, my wife and daughter also paint and draw and do that. So that's just kind of how we live, and I feel that's a blessing in a lot of ways because it's also very therapeutic, and it just keeps life fun and interesting.
Yes, yeah, for sure. So, sort of finding your way forward at high school days. What were your first bands? And I know of you from Suicidal, first off, but there would have been bands before them.
Yeah. So my first band, I don't remember the name of my very first band, but what I would call my first official backyard party band was a band called Oblivion. And Oblivion was interesting because we were a cover band, but we only played hard rock and metal. So we were playing Black Sabbath, Van Halen. We played a lot of Zeppelin and a lot of Rush, actually. And we would like challenge ourselves by playing crazy songs like La Via Strangiato or YYZ. Like we get into the complex songs and probably butcher them, but that's okay. You know, we were always, you know, pushing ourselves to be the best that we could be. And that was sort of the first real, I guess you could say, band I was in. That was the band that I actually played Gazzari's when I was, I think, 15 years old. I was still in high school, and that was like the big moment for me in my life. It's like, we made it, you know. So we got a 12-pack of beer. It was myself, a guitarist by the name of Todd Moyer from Culver High, and the drummer was Eric Hale from Venice High. And we had Dale Henderson from Beowulf. So all these guys that were in my band were in other Venice bands or westside bands. Mm-hmm. And at the time, we were all just coming up together, and we had just played like Train Kept a Rolling and like, I forget what other song, like 3 songs at the Gazzari's. And we got in my friend's van and went down to Bay Street with a 12-pack of beer and got really drunk and said, yeah, we made it.
And then how'd you find your way to Suicidal?
Rocky George was one of my best friends in high school, and actually even maybe junior high as well. And he was really into the guitar, but he was more into the Rolling Stones. And I said, you gotta listen to other guitar players, man. I said, you gotta listen to John McLaughlin and, you know, all these jazz fusion guys, Al Di Meola, and he did, and he started becoming kind of a guitar nerd, and somehow he ended up working with, or found his way to Amory Smith and Suicidal, and then eventually was just hanging out with those guys. I believe it was called the Motor Manor or something, where they lived, or where Amory lived, and eventually when they needed a guitar player, they reached out to him, and he was right there and jumped on board. I think his first album was Join the Army, and you know, he kind of became my hero because that was the first time I officially heard a friend of mine on a record on the radio. And I remember I was playing in this band called Perfect Stranger, and we had a gig out in Madam Wong's East, and we were in this parking lot, and it was one of those parking lots where you had to pay, and there was this sort of barricade, this arm kind of gate that came down. And the lead singer for the band, you know, he was like, I'm going to honk, and because we didn't want to pay for parking. And he says, and I'm going to run through the barricade and everybody follow me. So there's like 4 or 5 cars behind him. And it was so strange because on the radio, it was K-Rock, and it was Rodney Bingenheimer. So it was Rodney on the Rocks. Mm-hmm. And Rodney's announcing, I got a special single for you tonight. I got the debut single for Suicidal Tendencies, their new record, Join the Army. This song is called War Inside My Head. And right when the dude honked and we broke through the barricade, and where it's like this mad chase scene almost, that song was playing literally at the same time. And I just remember being so excited for, I guess, the neighborhood in a way, because that band to me represented the West Side. Yeah. And it kind of represented everybody. It represented the teenagers. It represented those who skated and surfed and who played punk rock and metal and all that. And I'm hearing this incredible song for the first time that my, great friend had written, and he brought me in the band.
Okay.
Long story short, yeah, they needed a bass player a few years later. And the crazy thing was, I auditioned, and then I had a funk band at the time called True Colors, and we were playing, Madam Wong's West, mostly Madam Wong's West, and a lot of the clubs around L.A., not so much Hollywood. We were more West Side. But, I auditioned, and then he said, okay, you got the gig. And I said, well, my band's going to get a deal soon. And the truth is I was picking up 3 guys all over L.A. in my station wagon, and they'd give me like they'd give me like $2 for gas. I was doing construction work at the time, hardwood floors and drywall and all that kind of stuff. And my band was great. We had great musicians, but those guys weren't really, I don't know if motivation's the right word. They were incredibly talented, but they weren't driven. And I was basically picking these guys up in South Central LA and Santa Monica, and then driving down to Redondo and everything. And I had said, well, we're going to get a deal soon. And then Rocky was like, okay, I'm going to call you tomorrow. I want you to think about this. We're going out on tour. We're going over to Europe. We're going to open for Anthrax. It's their first arena tour. This is a big deal. The band is signed. This is I don't know, it would have been their 3rd record or 4th record. It was just, I thought about it for 20 minutes. I called them right back. I said, I'm in, and then the rest is history.
Right.
So.
And had the song Institutionalized been written at that point, or was it?
Yeah, that was written, I think, in '83 that was released. So Suicidal, actually, the Institutionalized album was released around the same time as Kill 'Em All by Metallica and, Slayer's, first couple records. So it was all happening at the same time. And this was actually, I don't know, maybe 3 years later. It might have even been longer than that, because I officially joined Suicidal in '89. So there's this sort of gap. They had already done Join the Army and Controlled by Hatred, and How Will I Laugh was already released. So there was a few albums. I came in '89, and all that was going on, between '83 and '87, I think it was.
Yep.
Something like that. But that was my first big break for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love what you said about it was sort of our people, because I grew up in the Valley, but I was a surfer and a skater, and Mike Muir, the lead singer's brother, is Jim Muir, who I grew up, seeing in the magazines. He was one of my heroes. And then there was Mike Clark, who I actually surfed with a lot, and he surfed for Horizons West Surfboards, and he was a guitar player for a while.
Oh yeah. Incredible.
Yeah.
So Mike Clark is one of the best rhythm guitar players that I have known, ever. He just was, and I admired him because he got me into surfing again, because I was really into surfing in high school, and I used to surf in the morning before school. I used to ditch school to surf, basically, and just became kind of obsessed with surfing. And then I got caught up in the music scene and the club scene around LA. So waking up in the morning was out of the question for me, during those years, and the whole party thing. But when I went on tour with Suicidal, Mike Clark, would invite me to go surfing with him in Brazil or Australia or wherever we were, where there was a wave. He was going to go surf it, and he's, come with me. And I was like, okay. So I was the tag along.
Yep.
And then I just got back into it, and it was through him. And, I kind of was really in awe of the fact that this guy could play, such a great musician, and he was a great performer, but then he was such an amazing surfer.
Yes.
And he competed, as you know, and
yep.
And just the balance of all that, I just thought, well, hopefully someday I can have that, as well.
Yep.
So I, like I said, I started surfing more. I really, actually, it's crazy. I got into snowboarding. That was my next sort of, at age 30, I became completely addicted to snowboarding. I was still surfing, but snowboarding, I wanted to be, an amazing surfer, but I was a better snowboarder, to be honest. Just like I was never the best skateboarder, and I wanted to be so bad, but my son ended up being a great skateboarder instead of me.
Right.
But I was pretty damn good at snowboarding. I used to ride with the pros. But so around that time, this would have been like now we're getting into the very early 90s. I was doing a lot of surfing, but I was doing a lot of riding too. I started getting to snowboarding. So board sports have always been an important part of my existence. And some say, oh man, when you play the bass, it's like you're low center of gravity and this whole thing. And I guess I have to equate that to board sports. It's just, sometimes your whatever your kind of physical the habits or the things that you enjoy and your body language comes across through your instrument and your performance certain ways. It's kind of a weird thing, but it happens.
No, but I get that. And I mean, you could probably say this with anything, even, make flipping pancakes, but so much of life is flow and the groove but I think surfing, skating, snowing, the board sports you just described, specifically surfing, I mean, riding waves, and there's such a parallel with that in music in terms of one is maybe the literal representation of a wave moving, but orally through the ear, you're doing the same with music.
No, Kirk and I talk about it a lot because Kirk is an active surfer too. He lives in Hawaii, and he got into surfing a little bit later. But when I joined Metallica, that was one of the things that was so exciting because I had known Kirk from 1993 when Suicidal Tendencies was actually opening for Metallica on the Black Album tour for a while. We were out with him for I feel like it was like a year or something. But he wasn't surfing back then. He was doing the opposite. He was getting in party mode, going to bed at 6 a.m., and then at some point, when he remarried and everything, his wife at the time was from Hawaii, and he just somehow found his way to surfing. Okay. And he had called me he was coming to LA down to Southern Cal because he was living in San Francisco at the time. And he wanted me to take him surfing. And I wasn't in the band yet or anything. We just kind of knew each other from that tour in 93 and a mutual friend. He came down in an RV and I took him, I took him like El Porto and I think we surfed like Zeros and Zuma and County Line, just did the local tour. And he was camping, wherever that they could camp, that down, I think they even camped down at Dockweiler and
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
These crazy places. But we really hit it off, and we didn't talk about music much. We talked about surfing more than anything. And a year later, when they were actually auditioning bass players, I got the call. I was in Tahiti, actually, on a surf trip, and I was checking my voicemail, and he was on there with Lars, our drummer in Metallica, and they're like, come jam. Lars is like, come jam with us, come up to the Bay Area, and I'm thinking, okay, I have to go to a birthday party on Saturday night. It was Thursday in Tahiti. I was going to fly in and fly to SF. The minute Lars knew that, he was like, we'll see you on Monday. So I didn't really have time to prepare the songs, but I knew, a handful, and I was able to get by and get through the first audition that way. But somehow, getting back to surfing and the rhythm and the flow, surfing is what got me interested through Kirk to possibly join the band and audition. But that was through, I guess you could call it a surf trip that I had done locally with Kirk. Yep. And it's true because Kirk and I talk about it. The rhythm and the flow of the wave, it takes you into kind of, there's a rhythmic vibe to it. Sometimes even when you're just waiting for a wave, you'll tap your board and you can get a percussive, or you'll tap the water and you create beats, and and melodies will come into your head when you're out in the water. A lot of times when you're alone, you might start singing stuff. So the ocean is a magnet for music, And obviously, surfing itself is all about, flow and groove, and how you ride the wave and your timing is very important. I mean, all board sports, it's important. Timing is everything, and it's the same with music. I mean, timing is everything.
Yeah. No, what you were saying earlier about your household and just a lot of creativity coming from all bedrooms and studios, et cetera, and it just being this sort of house of a lot of creativity. And then talking about having a surge of creativity right now. I find surfing kind of loosens things. It's like it almost like brings out the Peter Pan, and that could be equated to being really creative, but a real sort of fresh, inspired place. See the renewal from the ocean, I guess.
Yeah, the ocean is so powerful. It's interesting because I'll go on tour, far away from the ocean. Great cities, beautiful places, great fans. And whenever I get off that plane and I'm just driving down Lincoln Boulevard and I'm getting on PCH and I see the Pacific, ocean, it's like relaxing, and it makes me feel and know that I'm home.
Yes. Yep.
It's comforting.
Yep.
And I don't care what I'm seeing on Lincoln or what I'm seeing along the way. I always feel great about that body of water.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. And I can't imagine not having it, And that's why it's expensive to live where we live, but I can't imagine being anywhere else,
Yep.
It's like, it's incredible. And like we were talking earlier about how fortunate we are with all the history and the interesting people and just everything about living where we live, and the experiences and the history to Southern California and Los Angeles and the West Side. And, I grew up going to concerts at the Santa Monica Civics, auditorium. And that's where I saw, Weather Report with Jaco Pastorius. And, I saw Ronnie James Dio there. But, so many bands, a lot of jazz fusion artists would play there in the 70s. But then at the same time, a lot of metal bands would play there. Suicidal, we played there.
Yep.
So that was always a place that really helped me grow and inspired me to become a musician.
Yeah, and if you had a good arm, you could probably throw a baseball from the Civic and it would land in the water at Bay Street.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. You just take your skateboard and ride down that hill and you're right in it.
Yep. Talking about, being in Tahiti and then getting the call to go to San Francisco, did you know like it was a proper audition for the band, or was it sort of like framed as like, come play with us, or was it like, we need a new bass player and we want you to try out?
It was kind of both. I mean, it was obviously the biggest audition that you could imagine at the time, but it was interesting because I was working with Ozzy Osbourne at the time, so I was in a pretty good position. So I kind of viewed it as an opportunity to jam with these guys and have fun with no expectations.
Yep.
I was like, I'm going to go up there. I haven't had a lot of time to practice the songs, but I did know a handful of them just because most musicians know bands that inspire them or they're influenced by. So I was able to play like 5 of the songs comfortably. And the audition was kind of crazy because I remember like about 11 at night, because you're staying there, you're there all day, basically. So at some point you're going to play, but part of it is hanging out because they want to see what you're like. And
yeah, sure.
Know that you're
someone that they could hang out with and tour with, etc. Yeah,
exactly. And so I was like a fly on the wall. They were actually recording the Saint Anger record, and the bass had already been tracked for that. Bob Rock had recorded the bass for that, the producer. So I was just kind of hanging out. It was a little strange, and watching them record. And then at one point, I forget if it was this first audition, because it was 2 auditions. But at one point they wanted me to record on one of the songs, and it was like, okay, here's a bass, listen to this song, play something, and it was basically recording. And so you get really thrown into the deep end quick. Mm-hmm. And I recorded something. And I remember looking back at Bob, and I'm thinking, well, he's the producer, so he's going to produce me right now. And he wasn't too happy about what they wanted to do, mm-hmm. what they wanted us to do. Mm-hmm. He didn't want any part of it because he's like, I don't know why they want to do this. I already recorded the bass on this song. And I was like, okay, this is really weird because James and Lars had left the control room, and I was just there with Bob and the assistant engineer, and he's not happy. So I'm like just kind of there with the assistant engineer and been asked to record on this song just to see what I can do. So that was part of the test, and everything was just kind of surreal and a little strange. Later on that night, it's like 11 o'clock, and Lars is like, hey, you want to go get a drink? And I'm like, okay. And he's like, well, if you're going to be the bass player in Metallica, we got to hang, and I'm like, okay. So we ended up going to a bunch of bars in and around Marin, and I was hammered. Luckily, my drinking chops were in decent shape because I had been working with Zach Wilde from Ozzy's band, with his group Black Label Society. And as anyone would know, there was a lot of drinking going on in that particular band. So I ended up partying with Lars till 5 in the morning. And I remember waking up around 8, literally like 3 hours later, and he's on the treadmill. Like I could hear him. Wow. I couldn't drive. I had to stay in his guest room. Uh-huh. And I hear somebody in the gym, and it's Lars, and he's on his treadmill. And I've got the worst hangover ever. And we've got to go to the studio at 11 o'clock, right on time. Uh-huh. And he's kind of like, just really like serious. And he's just like, okay, it's time to go. Let's go. And I'm just like, okay, like, where am I? It's like,
right.
And I'm following him to the studio, and it's like, I'm just sitting there with the guys. They used to have these meetings, like almost like a session before where they'd communicate. And James had just kind of gotten out of rehab and all this. So there was this intensity around James, and I was just lost because I had this massive hangover. Mm-hmm. And I kept going into the bathroom and throwing water on my face and going, I don't know if I can do this. I don't even know if I can play.
Yeah.
I had this headache. So then I figured, okay, the bass tech's out there. And the bass tech was my bass tech when I toured with Suicidal Tendencies opening for Metallica. Somehow I was adopted by him because I didn't have a bass tech. And we had the same managers. So I said, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to talk to him and tell these guys I got to figure out what bass I'm going to play and what amp I'm going to play. That way I could buy time and I could get out of this pressure situation. And that's what I did. I said, hey, I'm going to go and figure out what gear I'm going to play. And, and they, oh yeah, okay, go ahead. And I was like, oh, thank God. Because I was ready to say, I can't do this right now. You guys, I'm sorry, I'm sick.
Right.
And I survived that, but I literally was having pep talks with myself in the bathroom. You got this, you got to do this, you got to hang in there. But that was Lars's way of testing me.
I see.
To see if I could handle.
Yeah.
What's he like if he's, partying?
Yeah, sure.
What's his work ethic like? Can he handle this?
No,
so in a way, it was like people talk about, was there any hazing? Did they, play tricks on you or, anything like that? And I always say, I feel like that was a part of the process with him. And then there was something that happened in Madrid back in '93 where I drank a bottle of Jaeger with James and Lars, and I withstood that ordeal too. So there were different moments along the way, I think, that helped, them understand me better and what I could do as a person and as a player.
Yeah, given the intensity of the touring, there's the stuff on stage, but there's all the other stuff. But, Rob, I've known you for a while now, and I know you in the context of like mutual friends' birthdays and in the surf and all the stuff. But I can't get out of my head seeing you in some kind of monster in the scene in the documentary where they tell you that you're going to be in the band and they say, and we're going to start you out with $1 million.
Right.
What was that like?
Well, that was weird, and that was surreal, and that was like, I guess I didn't believe it. I got, it didn't seem real. It's just like, yeah. It's funny because you don't actually ever, it's there, but it's not there. So, everybody says, wow, man, after taxes, it's a little different than $1 million. And I guess I get so consumed with the workload to where I was like, okay, that's cool. But then in my head, I'm like, it's time to get to work.
Sure.
I've got this mountain of catalog to learn.
Yep.
And then there was this new album, Saint Anger, that they hadn't even played live, yet. Because that album was created in the studio.
Yeah.
So now I got to learn these songs. And I just saw it as like I got a lot of work ahead of me. I'm not going to worry about I'm not going to think about the money. I'm not going to celebrate what's going on because I got work to do. I remember I didn't go home for like 6 months almost. I mean, I might have gone home for a night or two to go get some clothes or, whatever I needed and to bring it back up north. But I basically moved to San Francisco right at that moment. And
wow.
My life changed forever.
Incredible. How long, so between the scene you just described with Lars where you're hungover and you're sort of being hazed and you're also like recording and playing, was it a few days later that they said you did that official thing for the documentary?
No, actually, no, because there were 2 auditions.
Okay.
So, and it wasn't like 2 in a row. It was like there was one and then there was another one like, I don't know, 4 months, 3 months later. I don't remember. But when things got more serious after the second audition, it was interesting because I had gotten a call from Ozzy, and Ozzy never called me. Like he just, you always hear from, someone from the management team, or maybe Sharon might call, Sharon Osbourne, his wife. But Ozzy never called me, and I get this call from him, and he's like, "Hey Rob, hey listen, let's go on the road, man. I'm ready. Ozfest. We're playing, right?" And I'm like, yeah, because I hadn't heard from Metallica. So I was like excited. Yeah, I get to go back to work because he started doing Sabbath at the time. They reunited, and so everything was revolving around Sabbath, which is awesome. But, I wasn't working. So I was like, wow, it's exciting. I get to go back on the road and get back to work. And literally like 2 days later or the next day, I get a call from Lars saying, "Hey, we want you to come up here and we want to talk to you." So I'm like, okay, they're not telling me I got the gig, but I'm like thinking, I always think worst case scenario. So thinking they're the kind of guys that would call, that would have you fly up there to tell you didn't get the gig.
Gotcha. Yeah.
They're just kind of wired that way. Like we just wanted to tell you in person because we respect you and you didn't get the gig, something like that. Sure. So I'm like preparing for that, but I'm not sure. And Ozzy had just called me, so I was like, wait, this is crazy. This is weird. So I go up there and, they say that's where the meeting was with the money offer and all that. And again, my head's spinning like, okay, I've got to learn 30 years of catalog. I've got to, it was like just kind of like a washing machine, rinse cycle going off in my brain. So basically now I'm thinking about Ozzy, and I told him, well, and I don't even know why I said this, but, I was trying to, always trying to be loyal to Ozzy and Sharon. They did so much for me. So I was like, well, I don't think I can do those dates. But when I finish my commitment with Ozzy, whatever 8-week run it was, I'll jump on board. And they were just like, and I remember Lars goes, we respect your loyalty, and it's very honorable, but this train is leaving and it's moving fast, and you got to jump on board and just jump on with us. And I'm like, okay. So I obviously flew home that night, and I actually went to Sharon and Ozzy's house and met with Sharon and said, "Yeah, I'm gonna, join Metallica." And you know, it was heavy. Yeah, it was just heavy because I think, when it's all said and done, every musician, you're writing music, you're creating, you're performing, so it's all passion driven.
Yeah.
So it's hard when you're losing a team member.
Sure.
Especially I had been there for like 7 years.
Yeah, you're like a family at that point.
It was difficult, but I also felt that I needed to be there in person to tell him and tell her, and so that's basically kind of how that went down. There was never any bad vibes.
There were no vodka bottles thrown at you.
No, nothing like that. Usually, when that happened in the past, it could get pretty ugly with anybody. I mean,
sure.
You're leaving a team, and it's like it's not good.
Yeah.
So and then again, like I said, my life changed. All of a sudden, I was a part of a new family, and I was living in a new area, and it was just a different existence.
Yeah. But being with Ozzy for 7 years, you'd played a lot of big shows, but so as it sort of took off with Metallica, was there a moment when you were like playing to a massive audience of like deep Metallica fans where you were on stage just going, fucking Metallica, this is incredible?
Well, going back to when I joined Suicidal Tendencies, it was already interesting back then because I was a fan of the band. Even though my best friend was playing guitar in the band, I was also a fan of the band. So I used to wear Suicidal T-shirts. I was wearing the hat all the time. I even went to one of their video shoots. I think it was for Institutionalized. Actually, I was kind of in the crowd there, and I didn't know Mike, but I was always kind of like, oh my God, that's Mike Muir, man. He beats people up. He's like all the stories, about these guys and all that kind of stuff. But to find myself in that band, and then to almost immediately start writing with Mike and experimenting with some of the music for Infectious Grooves, that came pretty quick. It took a while, but it's the process started pretty quick, and he ended up being a really cool dude, and so that was already a moment for me. Playing my first gig in Europe, opening for Anthrax with Suicidal, I used to wear the bass really high. My fingers would lock up because it was an uncomfortable position. I'm watching the mosh pits. I've never seen that like that before. Those European mosh pits, especially in Germany, was incredible, and I was laughing, like, oh my God, this is, I would laugh because it was so intense. And then now, I don't know how many years later, I'm with Ozzy, and I'm remembering playing backyard parties and playing Iron Man and Sweet Leaf and these songs, and now I'm on stage with Ozzy, and I remember in Las Vegas, we start doing the crab walk with each other, against each other. We're challenging each other, and we're playing, again, it was either Sweet Leaf or Iron Man. I feel like it was Sweet Leaf, but he's looking at me, I'm looking at him, we're in each other's face, and again, we finished that show in Vegas, it was, and I'm laughing again because it was so intense. Yeah, because it's a dream come true. I was playing these songs in backyard parties in Venice Beach, and here I am with the man himself. So now you go to Metallica, and I remember, Suicidal Tendencies already opening for Metallica was a dream for me, and I remember watching them and just thinking, man, I'll never be that big. I'll never be able to play on a stage like that and headline. Because it's just way beyond me. These guys are huge. It's not going to happen, in my lifetime. I better go get a job working at McDonald's or something. But, and again, when the announcement came on the radio, I was going surfing with a friend of mine, and I think we were going to County Line, and my friend, he's a German guy, and they announced on the radio, that Jason Newsted had left the band, and Metallica, the bass player had left, and he goes, I know who's a new bass player is going to be for Metallica. And I'm thinking like, I'm not thinking it's going to be me. I'm just like, he's just saying that or whatever. And then, of course, a year later, I got the audition. But these things, how they happen, and like you said, the size of it, and it's surreal, but you have to stay grounded.
Yeah.
It's probably the same for surfing. It's like you grow up surfing contests, here in Malibu or wherever, and all of a sudden you're a pipeline, right?
Yep.
And you're just like, you see the grandstand and you're surfing against some pro guy that you saw in magazines. It's like it turns into that, but you have to kind of stay grounded because you got to perform, whether it's compete or whatever level it is, you're performing, with music, you got to go up there and you got to, it gets pretty competitive with other bands, even though you're all friends and everything, it still gets competitive. So you put your game face on and you take care of business, but at the same time, you're like, wow, that's Tom Araya from Slayer. Or like, most of these guys are kind of new from Suicidal anyway. Suicidal got a lot of respect.
Yeah.
I mean, the guys in Metallica respected Suicidal. The guys in Slayer respected Suicidal. So that was already a pretty good thing for me.
Yeah. What's it like being in Metallica? What's it like when you play a show and after or in that city you're walking around? I mean, you guys are huge rock stars.
It's kind of crazy because it's gotten more intense. It's gotten, well, not intense, but it's gotten, I don't know, it's a little crazier now than it ever has been. And I always think that, hey, just you can go anywhere and just, when you walk off the stage, it's like my friends are the same friends I've had since I was in high school, or, I got a lot of the same people, that, are still in my life. And then all of a sudden, you've got strangers coming up to you asking for autographs and for photos, especially with iPhones. And I always want to be, respectful and appreciative because, those are the people that pay to see you. And I see like Jamie O'Brien and how connected he is to his fans. And I actually, in recent times, have learned from watching him, realizing that, hey, they're excited about you and, about myself and what I do, So that part of it is something that is different because I never thought of myself to be in a position of sort of importance or anything. I always just think like, this is what I do. Mm-hmm. I play music, and I'm passionate about it, and I make a living off of it, but I'm still me. I'm still the same dude, that goes and surfs Topanga or Will Rogers or County Line or whatever. And, that's the cool thing about the water is nobody really cares who you are.
Yeah. Yeah,
they don't really. No, surfers don't care who the hell you are.
Yeah.
It's like you go out, you paddle out, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
you snake somebody, someone's gonna, talk shit, whatever. It's like you get mad at other people. It's just the playing field just becomes very even. And that's what I love about it.
Yes. Yep. How did you get into surfing?
Well, originally, I started probably a little late. I would think I was in like 9th grade, and a friend of mine over at Culver High, he had called me and go, hey, Alejandro Trejo was his name. And he was like, we're all going to go surfing. We're going down to Bay Street. And, and I was like, oh, yeah, I don't know. I've never surfed really. I mean, I skateboard, they all knew that I skated, but so I went with them. I got a board. Don't worry about it. So I loved it. I just thought, this is awesome. And I borrowed a friend's 8.0, big single fin, and my dad lived at Venice Beach, so because my parents were divorced, and I just started surfing over at Venice. I remember my first wave at the breakwater, till this day, and I just became hooked, and eventually got into actually having custom boards made and, kind of graduated to that. And now I just got too many surfboards. I just it's overboard. But one of the interesting things, and I was going to talk about this, is, through Suicidal Tendencies and Metallica, over the years, we've developed a friendship with surfers from all over the world. So if I'm in Portugal, I'm surfing with a crew out there, same crew I've had for 20 years. They're going to take me around. They're going to take me to the best, wherever the waves are the best on that tour or that trip. Sometimes even go there when I'm on tour in Europe and I do a little side trip.
Okay.
Same thing with, southwest of France, Biarritz,
Yep.
that whole region. Love going there with my family. Chloe is from Paris.
Yep.
So, the whole French, part of that equation is wonderful. And it's also the Basque region. We love that too. So it somehow is turned into like being able to play music, travel, but end up in these really wonderful places where we can be a part of the culture and experience, the food, the music, the waves. And that's part of what makes traveling as a musician incredibly special. My son, with his band Otto, is playing and headlining a metal festival in Tahiti, June 1st. I'm so excited for him because, it's one of the most beautiful places on the planet. He surfs. And I'm just telling him, get ready. I can't go because I'll be on tour, but I'm like, you guys are going to be so happy with this. It's just, the people are great. The fans love music and they're appreciative over there, but the waves are insane.
Yeah. No, I love that. I remember seeing you maybe a summer or two back. We were at a friend's birthday party at Topanga, and Ty had just arrived. I want to say he just came in from the airport, and he'd been on the road with Suicidal Tendencies playing bass.
Right.
And I was like, this is this must be such a trip for you as his father. What's it like having your son fall like totally in your footsteps?
Well, it's been interesting because he is obviously an amazing player and he's his own player. People try to say sometimes like, oh, he's so great. He reminds them of me, kind of a thing. And the weird thing is when I see him play, he actually reminds me more of like Cliff Burton from Metallica. He's got his own thing, is what I'm trying to say. So he's been very lucky because in a way he's been able to have his cake and eat it too. He's been able to actively tour with Suicidal Tendencies, but also, like I was telling you, he's going with his band Otto to Tahiti. He's got another band called Feed the Beast, which is more of a hardcore group. So every single day he's either going to a recording session or a rehearsal, or he's writing. He's constantly in and out, but it's always revolving around music and creativity. Yeah.
So great. Who are your heroes, or who do you look up to? Who are your inspirations?
Well, I tell you, a lot of people. That's a difficult question because growing up, like Jaco Pastorius, who I saw perform at the Santa Monica Civic, he's playing primarily electric jazz fusion. Super funky player, very unique in his style, but also a great performer. He was bringing a lot of that entertaining kind of, what you'd find more in rock music to, jazz rock and they call it fusion. And that was exciting for me to see this long-haired dude shredding on the bass, using it as more of a lead instrument and a melodic instrument, but also being a composer. Being the composer that he was, I was moved by it. And similar to Eddie Van Halen, how Eddie Van Halen spoke through his instrument. And that was important because that was a moment when I saw him play at Santa Monica, that told me that even was insurance to me wanting to be a bass player.
I see.
It was like, that's great because there's no rules. He's playing with distortion. His sound was different. And the other guys, no disrespect, they were more, laid back, a little more conservative looking in their performance. And he was just out there doing it. And it was just so much fun to see. And then eventually, connecting with some of the funk oriented bass players like Bootsy Collins from Parliament, Larry Graham from Sly and the Family Stone and Graham Central Station. Just listening to the radio and always gravitating towards the bass lines. Eventually, Lemmy from Motorhead bringing his dynamic to the mix, and Geddy Lee from Rush, who's now become a friend. He inspired me tremendously. He always had a certain sound and way of writing and preparing music that was very bass centric, So and then of course here we are years later, and a lot of these guys are friends of mine, and there's mutual respect, which is always nice. But growing up around here, growing up with Flea and from the Chili Peppers and all that, it's just really fun to be in this environment. It's the great thing about being here in Los Angeles. You've got all these incredible musicians. Like if I'm getting into a recording project that's totally fun and casual, it's like this drummer's a phone call away, or that drummer's a phone call away, or you're getting a call to work on this guy's record, or that, if I'm available in town. And that's really exciting because it's not often that you get into these cities with so many great musicians that are humble and passionate about their music and collaborating, and just to have that around you is great. It's like being a kid again back when you get the call to go skateboarding, or to go surf. Hey, the swell's up, man. I heard it's like there's a wedge down at Westward or whatever, it's just like, okay, I'll be there. It's like, it's the same thing with music now. I get a call like, hey, it's like the whole, I co-wrote Ozzy's record 3 or 4 years ago, and that was during the pandemic, and it was the same kind of thing. Hey man, come on down. We're recording with Ozzy, and okay, yeah, sure, I'll be there. Jump in the car, go down. And you lock yourself in the studio for a month, So it's very powerful, and that's what's exciting about music and creating and writing and recording. In the same way that you can go surf a wave or have that experience. To me at least, it feels that way.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the thing is in the other side of it is like, it's just having music in your head and having the idea of creating something, and it's very much parallels with surfing. And it's like that thing when you get really into surfing, it's sort of, it stays with you. You're as you were talking about, like waking up in the middle of the night and being haunted by probably some music you're hearing. A lot of young surfers have that with just the feeling of being on a wave, and it's such a fortunate thing to have in life, that level of passion.
Absolutely. I always, tell my kids, being able to surf, being able to skate, and being able to play music, you can take that with you all around the world. When we'd go on these long tours and we'd bring the kids when they were younger, they'd have their skateboards with them. I literally pack their skateboards, and they're skating in Berlin. They're skating in Russia. They're skating in Japan. It's like part of the experience, and that's important too, because now you're interacting with kids from other parts of the world.
Yes.
And you're doing it through, through skating. And of course, where there's a beach and there's a wave, we're going to surf it. That's just the way it's been. Like I was telling you earlier, I mean, we were hanging out with I was back in the day, I remember in the 90s, with Jesse Fain was still living at Narrabeen, and he was the editor of Tracks magazine, Surf magazine, Surf Sessions and all that, and Tracks, and it was a fun time. And you would be at a party. I remember playing a backyard party in Australia, and you got Kelly Slater's there, but then you got Barton Lynch's there. You know what I mean? And you have like all of the top, Matt Hoy, Luke Egan, all these guys are there. Shane Powell had taken Mike Clark and I surfing, I remember. Just having those opportunities through music to take these sidebar journeys with these incredible surfers that were also moved by the music.
Yes.
Because the music motivated them, whether it was through competition or those surf trips, any of that, it all goes hand in hand to me. It's all relative. In having friends like John Theodore, a drummer for Queens of the Stone Age,
Yep.
who's a surf friend of mine, who I surfed with for about 15 years before I ever played music with the guy. We were surfers first, just like with Kurt. We were surfers first.
Yep.
And then it was like, oh, that's right, you play drums. You want to go to Hawaii and play in the wedding band? We're going to play covers. Sure, I'll go. Next thing you know, we're have this cover band together. And it all started because we were at Benji Weatherly's wedding and, at Waimea Falls. And we played about 5 gigs since then. It's not consistent, but it's fun. But it brought us together, and it was through surfing and surfing events. So somehow they're connected. And again, there's nothing. I tell my kids, if you can, write songs on the beach, get a rehearsal space on the beach, go for a surf, take a break, and have a barbecue at the same time. That's the best. That's the most incredible experience ever. It doesn't get better than that, and fortunately that's how we kind of live and exist, the balance of the ocean with the creativity of music and the experience of recording. The main studio that I work out of, and actually where Ty works out of, and a lot of other friends of mine, is in Venice. It's Venice Beach, literally. It's the same hood where we all grew up. It's the same area where, all of our experiences through skating and surfing have existed. And that's where we make music till this day.
Wow.
We're still there.
Yeah.
And it's humble.
Yeah.
It's a humble spot, but we make great music out of there, and I wouldn't change it for the world,
Very nice.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rob.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Soundings is brought to you by the Surfer's Journal and is produced by me, Jamie Brisick, and Jonathan Shiflett. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Our theme song is Give Me a Wave by Oscar Matsumiya and Paz Lenchantin. The Surfer's Journal is a reader-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from FCS, Finisterre, Howler Brothers, Outerknown, Patagonia, Rainbow Sandals, Vans, and Yeti. The journal is published bi-monthly. If you haven't done so yet, I encourage you to visit surfersjournal.com and subscribe. This episode of Soundings is presented by Costa Sunglasses, the badge of the explorer. For over 40 years and counting, Costa has remained steadfast in their dedication to not only crafting the most durable, functional, and long-lasting eyewear, but in protecting our waterways and natural resources. Whether you're on the back deck scanning for yellowtail, eyeing a set swinging wide at an empty point, camped out on a bluff at the end of a rotted 2-track, or anywhere and everywhere in between, Costas are built to help you see what's out there. Head over to costadelmar.com today to find just the right pair for you, no matter where the water takes you. Thank you for listening to Soundings, and until next time.